learning is Leilin Nishmas Mindel Mariam Bas Kalman Ruven her Neshama Shavaliya. We're up to Kuf Lamed Beis Amud Aleph by the two dots. Further about Bris Milah Shabbos. Okay, a little bit. But today we're going to be focusing mostly on limudim, like what's the source for Bris Milah. Actually, entirely on the source. Until now, there's been a machlokas about are you allowed to do the preparatory elements of Bris Milah and other mitzvos before on Shabbos, and that's where the Ezra says yes. The Chachamim say no. The question is, but everyone agreed about Bris Milah that Bris Milah overrides Shabbos, and that's the way we paskin that if a person's bris falls out on Shabbos, then you do the bris on Shabbos. Now it's worth noting that if the bris does not fall out on Shabbos, but let's say Shabbos is the first day the bris is allowed to be done. So for example, the baby is not ready for bris, and the 8th day is Friday. But the end of the 8th day they're like, okay, you can do the bris tomorrow. You wouldn't do the bris. It's only when the 8th day falls out on Shabbos. Fine, but everyone agrees to this, and the question is, what's the source? Why does everyone agree to this? Where does this idea come from that if the bris falls out on Shabbos, you do the bris on Shabbos? So that's really what we're going to be spending the entire day focusing on today, different possible sources for that. So so again, by the two dots, or if you're on the article 132A1 towards the bottom of the first column. Ad kan lo pligi Rabbanan alei ela b'machshirei mila. The only machlokas between the Rabbanan and Eliezer is regarding the preliminary or the preparatory elements of Bris Milah. Val Mila Gufa, when it comes to circumcision itself, Divrei Kol Docha Shabbos, everyone agrees that it overrides Shabbos. Minalan, what is the source for this? Amar Ula, halacha. Ula says it is halacha l'Moshe Misinai. Halacha l'Moshe Misinai means as follows: when Hashem gave the Torah to Moshe, He told him certain things you write down, and certain things do not write down, but rather you pass on as an oral tradition. And we have a number of things which are chalked up as a halacha l'Moshe Misinai, the shorthand halacha, which means that Moshe was taught this and was passed on from generation to generation. V'chein Amar Rav Yitzchak halacha, and Rav Yitzchak also taught this is a halacha l'Moshe Misinai. Okay. However, this gets questioned. Meisvei, they ask the following question: Minayin, there is a brayso that says the following: Minayin levikuach nefesh shedoches Shabbos. Where do we know? What's the source that saving a life overrides Shabbos? Right? We all know this. We all take this for granted that if there is something which is life threatening on Shabbos, you desecrate Shabbos in order to save a life. So Elazar ben Azariah Omer ma mila shi achas meivarav shel adam. Just like in as much as bris milah, which is a fulfillment of a single mitzvah in one of a person's limbs, dochas Shabbos, we know that it overrides Shabbos. Kal v'chomer, okay, all the more so, lifikuach nefesh, saving a person's life, which enables the person to continue fulfilling mitzvos, for which is all of the, using all of their limbs, shedochas Shabbos, that it should override Shabbos. Okay, period. That's the end of the brayso. The brayso basically tells us that there is a kal v'chomer, some form of a learning, a logical learning, that in as much as bris milah overrides Shabbos, for sure, saving a life overrides Shabbos. Now, the Gemara says like this: halacha. And if you want to say bris milah is a halacha l'Moshe Misinai, kavachomer me halacha mi'asi, are you allowed to make a kavachomer from a halacha l'Moshe Misinai? Okay, so before we see this explicitly, let's just explain this. And this is actually something which always troubled me. Okay, there's this concept that certain halachos were written down and certain halachos were given to Moshe were not written down. I've always wondered why. Like, what's the difference? Why would some halachos not be written down? Okay, the Rabbanan things which are dirabanan. Okay, so Hashem didn't want it, even if Hashem foresaw and wanted those things to happen, Hashem wanted there to be a distinction between biblical and rabbinic. That I could understand why rabbinic laws, why muktzah is not written in the Torah, because there needs to be a difference that one thing is rabbinic and has a different set of laws, and one thing is biblical. But if there's certain things which are halacha l'Moshe Misinai, certain things which are taught to Moshe, they have the same weight as a d'oraisa, as a biblical law. Why did Hashem not tell him to write it down? Why instead have a tradition? So the Gemara's premise over here would answer that question. The Gemara's premise is that whereas it's something written in the Torah, you could assume if it's written in the Torah, that means that there is something which could be understood, something which could be dealt with, and therefore you can make a kal v'chomer. A kal v'chomer means if the more small thing is true, then the more big thing. If I say that my 4-year-old daughter could reach the mezuzah, then certainly I, the tall one who's taller, could reach the mezuzah. That's a kal v'chomer, right? If it's written in the Torah, that means I could deal with it as a logical entity. But if it's a halach l'Moshe Misinai, it's something which is not something I could deal with. It's like almost like a standalone, and therefore one of the possible reasons would be exactly what we're discussing here. I would not be able to make a kal v'chomer. If bris milah overriding Shabbos is a halach l'Moshe Misinai, it would be something which is I can't deal with. I don't have any reason to. It's not something which I could deal with in a regular way, and therefore I will not be able to make a kal v'chomer, and that would be one possible reason why certain things are not being written down. And that's what the Gemara's premise is over here. The Gemara is saying, if you want to tell me, if you Ula and Rav Yitzchak want to tell me that the bris milah overriding Shabbos is halacha l'Moshe Misinai, then this brayso over here wouldn't make sense. because it's using a kal v'chomer from bris milah. If bris milah overrides Shabbos, certainly bikuach nefesh overrides Shabbos. You can't do that, right? So that because you can't learn a kal v'chomer from halach l'mishmi Sinai. And now the Gemara is going to just demonstrate you can't learn a kal v'chomer from halach l'mishmi Sinai. Batanya, it was taught in a brisa. Amar lo Rav Elazar ben Azariah. Rav Elazar ben Azariah said, Akiva, he's referring to Rabbi Akiva, etzem kisaora mitame halacha. Okay, they're talking about a nazir becoming tamei, becoming tamei, to a revius of blood. If a nazir touches a revius of blood, they have to start their naziros over again. And Rabbi Akiva wanted to learn it from a kal v'chomer, from etzem kisaora, from the fact that a nazir becomes tamei by carrying a small bone the size of a barley. Therefore we should make some form of a kal v'chomer to revius of blood. So he says, how could you use a kal v'chomer? Ve'intan kal v'chomer halacha. Since etzem kisaora, the halacha of a barley-sized bone contaminating nazir is a halacha l'mishmi sin, you can't learn a kal v'chomer from there. And therefore, how could you learn this kal v'chomer? Bottom line is, we're therefore applying it over here. If bris milah is a kal v'chomer, if bris milah is halacha l'mishmi sinai, it would not be allowed to be utilized in a kal v'chomer, and therefore this brisa, which clearly tells us that there was a kal v'chomer involving bris milah overriding Shabbos, applying to pikuach nefesh overriding Shabbos, something is off. It cannot be halacha mishmi sinai. I hope that made all sense. Let's go to, so the Gemara rejects. The Gemara says, you're right, it can't be a halacha mishmi sinai, rather we're going to learn it from something else. Elam or Rav Elazar at the bottom of 132a1, asya os. This is Xera Shava. Xera Shava means when you have letters, which are the words that are the same in two sections, we could derive halachos learned from one another. Since it says os by Shabbos, and it says os by bris, okay, therefore, bris milah overrides Shabbos since they have the same word, and just like os means you could observe Shabbos, which is the os, so too you do a bris milah, which is the os. Ask the Gemara 132a2 Elami Atza Tefillin Dechsimen Os Lidchei Shabbos. Okay, wait a second. It also says Os by Tefillin, and we all know we don't wear Tefillin on Shabbos, so that can't be the case. It can't be that just because it says Os by Bris Milah, therefore it overrides Shabbos. Can't be. Ela Asya Bris Bris. So rather, we're going to say the fact that it says the word Bris by Bris Milah, and the fact that Shabbos is called a Bris. Therefore, you see from here you're allowed to keep Shabbos. That just like Shabbos takes place on Shabbos, so too Bris Milah takes place on Shabbos. And ask the Gemara Gadol Dechsibe Bris. There is a pasuk that speaks about an adult who did not get a bris and use the word bris in that pasuk. Lidchei Shabbos. It should override Shabbos, as we pointed out before. If it's not the 8th day, everyone agrees that it's not override Shabbos. So clearly we can't learn it from the word bris. Ela asya doros doros. Rather, we're going to learn it from the word doros doros, because it says doros by Shabbos and it says doros by bris, and therefore we should say that it should override Shabbos. Ask the Gemara, tzitzis tichseh bei doros. By tzitzis it also says doros lidchei Shabbos. To make tzitzis should override Shabbos, and everyone agrees you're not allowed to make tzitzis on Shabbos. We saw that the other day. Elam Rav Nachman Yitzchak like this: Done an os bris vidoros, may os bris vidoros. So the fact that bris milah has all those words, os, bris, and doros, and Shabbos has the words os, bris, and doros, is to teach me that I could do a bris milah on Shabbos, lapuke hanach, to exclude the other ones, dechad chad hu dechsibehen, where it only says one of those words, either bris, either os, either doros, but doesn't say all three, and therefore bris milah overrides Shabbos, but tefillin, tzitzis, an adult who missed the dates of the bris milah, none of those override Shabbos. Okay, that's one possible source. Now we'll see another source. Rav Yochanan Amar Kra Bayom. It says on the 8th day. It says day, Bayom afilu b'Shabbos. The fact that it says the 8th day and the word Bayom is extra, it's to teach me even on Shabbos. Amar Reish Lakish to Rav Yochanan. Reish Lakish, who was Rav Yochanan's brother-in-law and Chavrusa, says to him, Elam if that's so, Mechisuri kapara, dichsibuhu Bayom, regarding someone who lacks atonement. What that means is a person who the days of their purification are over. Let's say it's someone who had to wait 7 days for something for impurity, and then the Torah says that on that last day they bring karbanos. And the pasuk says bayom. So hachirami dachu Shabbos. So if you want to say the word bayom means that it should be done on that day, no matter what, that means that such a person brings their karbanos on Shabbos. Everyone knows that you only don't bring personal karbanos on Shabbos; you only bring communal karbanos on Shabbos. It says the Gemara hahumi baile bayom v'lo b'layla. The pasuk by the person lacking atonement, the word bayom there is needed to teach me that the karbanos are brought during the day and not at night. So that's what the word bayom is doing, and that's why it's not available to teach that it overrides Shabbos. So Gemara says, "Hainami by le bayom v'lo b'layla." But by bris milah also we need a verse to teach me that the bris milah is done during the day and not at night, right? There's halacha, you only do bris milah during the day. So the Gemara says, no, ahumi ben shmonas yom nafka. That we already learned from the fact that it says at the age of 8 days, and I use the word 8 days, teaching me that bris milah is done during the day and not at night. So Gemara says, Hainami b'yom tavoso nafka. But we also from the pasuk also by the karbanos also says b'yom tavoso, which also is an extra word by yom, teaching me that it's done during the day. So the bottom line is these verses, these sections are almost seemingly identical. And by bris milah, you want to tell me these psukim are teaching me that I should do the bris milah on the 8th day, even if it falls out on Shabbos. And yet, as Rish Lakish points out, the psukim are almost identical. And yet by mechusrei kapara, but this person who needs to bring karbanos, even though it says bayom, it doesn't mean that it's done on that day, right? So what's going on? So Rav Yochanan explains why they're not identical. Even though it's true that it's brought only by the day, it's learned from the words bayom tzava. So it's tricha. You need to have an extra pasuk which is not going to teach me that it's done on the Shabbos, that the karbanos are brought on Shabbos, but rather it's going to teach me something else. Why? Since by a person who's mechusar kapara, there is a special dispensation, meaning certain karbanos you have to bring whatever the Torah says. By someone who is lacking atonement, the Torah says if you can't afford it, you bring this, and if you can't afford that, you bring this. And you can't afford that, you bring this. You have basically this whole sliding scale of payments where not of payments of karbanos, but basically on based on your financial abilities, which is unique. And therefore, the Gemara says that since there's already one unique leniency by this person who is mechusar kapara, b'layla nami lesi, I would have thought that maybe a person should also bring a karban at night. In other words, once you see one leniency that you bring it even if you don't bring the regular animal. Instead, you could bring a dove or whatever. So too, maybe I could bring it at night. So kamash malan, I need the extra words on the day to teach me that it's specifically brought during the day, because I would have thought that there's an extra leniency because of the other leniencies that exist by mechusar kapara. Ask Ravina, Maskul Ravina, Elamiate his zar kasher behen, ye onin b'kasher behen. We say, wait a second. If you want to tell me there's a svara to say that since there's one leniency, we should apply other leniencies. So maybe the other leniencies that we have to count are not only that it should be brought during the night, but maybe also that it should be that a non-Kohen should be able to bring this offering. Normally you have to have a Kohen be a Kohen, and maybe it should also be an Onain, a person who is lost their loved one, they're not allowed to bring karbanos, so a person who is in that state of aninus immediately after death, maybe they should also be able to bring the karban. Where do you have psukim countering those things? So Gemara says no. Rabbi Yochanan says ha'ahadre kra. The fact that the pasuk says on the day shows that basically is bringing it back to say that yes, there's one leniency, but even though it only focuses on the daytime, it's telling you that all the other leniencies don't apply. Okay, so the bottom line is, again, let's just review. There's a little bit of a difficult back and forth. Bottom line is, Rabbi Yochanan says there's an extra word by yom to teach me that it's not only that it's done during the day, that the bris milah is done during the day and not at night, but also halacha that it's done on the 8th day if it falls on Shabbos, even though it falls on Shabbos. So Rabbi Rish Lakish tried challenging that from the section of mechusar kapara. Rabbi Yochanan says mechusar kapara is different because there the two psukim by yom teach me a different thing. One, it teaches me yes, it has to be done during the day. The second by yom, which by bris milah you're telling me is teach me that it overrides Shabbos. You can't do that by mechusar kapara because there you need that word by yom to teach me that all the leniencies you would have applied. Meaning, whether it's because since you have some leniencies by mechusar kapara that you could bring a lower level, a cheaper karban, so you might have thought there's other leniencies that it could be brought at night, that Oni could bring it, that it could be brought by Yisrael. Kamash Malan from the word by yom, teach me that no, it's basically to treat it on every other respect other than cheaper karbanos, treat it like a regular karban. Okay, that's the end of Rav Yochanan's approach. Now we're going to learn one more approach, a third approach. Rav Acha bar Yaakov Amar Kra Shmini. It says in the pasuk Shmini Afil b'Shabbos, from the word 8th day. Teach me that if the bris milah falls out on the 8th day, even if it's on Shabbos, you do the bris milah. Ask the Gemara, Hai Shmini mi ba'ilel muteshvi. The word 8 is needed because we need to teach you not to do it on the 7th day. Did I share? No, we found this later on. My grandfather's a mohel here in Baltimore. I actually used to go out to eat with him sometimes. People walk over to us like, oh, you did my bris milah. Anyway, it's like a weird thing to say. Anyway, but he was a very nice chazan. Yes, thank you so much. I appreciate it. He's a very nice person. So anyway, but he has a tshuva that was, there's a tshuva in Bris Moshe where he's responding to my grandfather because he would do a lot of, as many of the mo'alim, they would get calls from people who are not observant. And this one person called, he wanted to do, it was, the 8th day was a Monday, and they wanted to do a big gala bris for their child on a Sunday. They work on Monday. They were not observant at all, and basically said they called my grandfather and they said we want to do a bris on a seventh day on Sunday, and could you do it? He said it's the eighth day. He said, well, we're not going to do it. We're only going to do it on the seventh day. We're not going to do a bris milah if not then. And so he asked for Moshe. Moshe said, absolutely not. You don't do the bris milah. It's not your responsibility. They can't, whatever. The seventh day doesn't work. The pasuk says, meaning it's meaningless. It's meaningless to do a bris milah on the seventh day. And fine. There was a little bit more to tshuva, but that was the basic tshuva. Okay, that's our claim to fame. Our grandfather's in Yiras Moshe. Okay, that's my yichus. Okay, fine. So, but yeah, bottom line is it's completely invalid, right? It's completely invalid if you do it early. And the word eighth day is coming to teach you that they cannot be done on the seventh day. So the Gemara says, mi ben shmonos yamim nafka. He says, no, we already have another pasuk that says the child is an 8-day-year-old child, to exclude that if it was on the seventh day. So the Gemara says, no. The Gemara says, no, but I still need two psukim. One to exclude this seventh day, one to exclude the ninth day, right? Both are important. If I would only have one person, you would have thought you can't do it on the seventh day because the time of the mitzvah has not yet arrived. But you would have thought that fine, you can't do it early, but on the ninth day you should be able to do it. So the Torah is teaching me that no, it's only the eighth day which could be done, which could be done. But the bottom line is that these psukim are needed. The psukim of Bayom Hashmini, the two psukim of Shmini, one is needed to exclude the ninth day, should not be done late, and one is cannot be done early. So therefore, these psukim are used up. So the bottom line is the pasuk says, the Gemara says, you're right. This last approach we reject, and rather we go back to Rav Yochanan. So now we leave it off. There's two possible sources. Everyone agree with it, either because of all the words in the pasuk, os, bris, and doros. That's one approach, or Rav Yochanan's approach from the word bayom, which is extra. Bottom line is a bris milah overrides Shabbos. Okay, now the Gemara is going to bring a proof to Rav Yochanan's approach. Tanya kavase de Rav Yochanan. Source, a brisa which seems to support Rav Yochanan. Again, Rav Yochanan is an amora. A brisa would be helpful. Brisa being in the times of the Tanaim would help to support Rav Yochanan. Udelokar v'achar Yaakov, and not like the approach of os, bris, and doros. Right, so it's going to support the bayom approach and not the approach which says os, bris, and doros. The Tanya. Okay, the Bryce is like this. Shmini Yimol, okay, Afil b'Shabbos, it says on the 8th day he should be circumcised, even on Shabbos. And what do I get? But there's a pasuk that says, you desecrate Shabbos, you're put to death. Bishar malachos chutz milah is regarding other malachos, other forbidden labors besides bris milah. Ask the Bryce, so ina al milah. Maybe doing a milah would also be included in those who desecrate Shabbos. Umani mekayim shmini Yimol. What is... And what would be the purpose of the words on the 8th day? Chutz mi Shabbos, teach me, yes, on the 8th day, but not on Shabbos. Talmud Lomar, and here's the words that support Rav Yochanan, Bayom. The pasuk says on the day, Afilu b'Shabbos. So you see from this brisa that it's the word Bayom, which really teaches me that the bris milah overrides Shabbos. That's the point that we're trying to that we're supporting. So this goes like Rav Yochanan. Now the Gemara is going to analyze this brisa. The brisa was a little cryptic, and we're going to just analyze what exactly the brisa was, the back and forth in the brisa. So Amarava, Hai Tana me'ikara maika nichale u'basof maika kashale. This brisa, like what in the beginning it seemed to be saying, 100% Shabbos over bris milah overrides Shabbos, and then it questioned that. What's the back and forth in this brisa? Okay, but again, the reason was brought up was to teach me bayom is the pasuk brought in the brisa, which shows us that it's Rav Yochanan that we're going like. We said it, the source of milah overriding Shabbos is from the word bayom, and not the earlier approach which said it's 3 words, doros, os, and bris, right? So that's our goal. But now we're going to unpack this brisa. So hachikamer, this is the brisa was saying. Shmini Yimol afil b'Shabbos. It says on the 8th day. The implication would be that on Shabbos as well. Umani mekayim mechalemas yumos b'sham melachos chutz mimilah avamila dachya. And but you would say the mechalemas yumos is referring to other activities, other labors, but Mila would indeed override Shabbos. And what's the reason you would say so? My time a kavachomer, you would say it based on a kavachomer. What's the kavachomer that bris Mila would override Shabbos? Umat tzoras shedoches avoda. If a Kohen has tzoras, he cannot do the avoda, right? So tzoras overrides avoda. We're at Kuf Lav and Beis now. The avoda doches Shabbos, and we know that doing the service in the Beis Hamikdash, even though it entails doing many labors, it overrides Shabbos, right? So you have tzoras, which is more chamor, more strict than avoda, and avoda, which is more strict than Shabbos, right? Tzoras, avoda, Shabbos, right? So Mila dochosa, and yet the mitzvah of Mila overrides tzoras. What does that mean? That means if a Kohen is born, has a a piece of taras on his foreskin. So we generally have halach, it's forbidden, it's absolutely usher to remove, let's say a person has taras, so they take like a pimple, they go to the dermatologist, they zap it off, whatever it is, they scratch it off, they laser it off, usher. You're in violation of a biblical prohibition to do so. And yet, if a person has a piece of, has taras on the place of the milah, then the milah overrides taras. So what do you see? If we just said taras, avoda, Shabbos, and now we see that bris milah overrides taras. So you see milah, taras, avoda, Shabbos, right? You've just put milah on top of even avoda, right? So what do you see? So Shabbos shenchas b'nei avoda. We see that Shabbos, which is overridden by avoda, ein adin shtei milah dochosa. So certainly milah should override it. You follow the logic? Again, taras is more chamor than avoda, and avoda is more chamor than Shabbos, but bris milah is more chamor than taras. So taras certainly, just like avoda override Shabbos, certainly taras should override bris milah should override Shabbos. Okay, ask the Gemara. So my eno dekamar. So what was the Gemara's hesitation? Right, the Brisa said, but maybe it's not so. Hadar Amar, the Gemara, the Tana said to himself, Umay taras chamura. Who says that it really taras is more strict? Dilma Shabbos chamura. Maybe Shabbos is really more stringent. Shekeni yesh ba'onshan v'asaras harbe. At the end of the day, there are many prohibitions and warnings around keeping Shabbos, which is unique to Shabbos. Umimay mishum dechamir tarasu. And maybe the reason that the person who has taras cannot do avoda is not because of the taras per se. Dil mishum gabrahu delo chazi. It's because the person is unfit; they are ritually impure. Meaning, what the Gemara is saying is as follows: let's say a person had taras and they went through the entire purification process, but they didn't yet go to the mikvah. And the taras is gone. There's no more taras there. What's the halacha? They still can't do the avoda. Why? Because it's no longer about the taras. It's that the taras caused the person to become tameh. So it's not about the taras per se, it's the implication of the taras, the person is now tameh. That's the issue. So mani mekayim shmini yimol, chutz Shabbos, and therefore maybe when the pasuk says the eighth day, it means the exception of Shabbos. So tamalo, and therefore the Gemara is rejecting the kal v'chomer, and therefore the Brisa then concludes tamalomer bayom afilu b'Shabbos. So that's why it comes back to the words bayom to say even on Shabbos. And again, those words bayom tells me even on Shabbos. So now we could say bris milah does override Shabbos, and the fact that it says bayom, it doesn't say os, bris, and doros, teaches us that we go like Rav Yochanan and not like the other limud, and that's how the Gemara concludes this halacha. Okay, we'll come back to the further discussion about bris milah, God willing, tomorrow. Have a great day.